We now have it confirmed that with the April monthly patch for New World, we are going to be getting the mutated version of Tempest Heart. For whatever reason, probably because they had a lot of bugs to fix with the expedition, Amazon delayed the introduction of the mutated version. They did not introduce it alongside the normal version back in the previous patch. However, in this patch 2 update, it has now clearly been revealed that they are planning on introducing this in the April patch. Now, obviously, once the patch goes live, it might not immediately be live. We might have to wait until it naturally comes into the rotation. Thankfully though, the rotation now includes 2 expeditions, so it will be available a lot more than it would have been otherwise. And an important thing to consider is because Tempest Heart is seen as one of the harder expeditions, it's probably time to prepare. Now that's either for your own runs through it, or just simply to try and make gold. So we're going to do 5 quick tips that you probably want to consider before you enter. And to be fair, Tempest Heart is probably going to be worth doing because the loot looks pretty damn good, and you're only going to get more of it in the mutated versions. If you get to Mutated 10, for example, you'll have the best chance of getting all of the good stuff. Therefore, I think when this is available, the demand for everything will essentially just increase because there will be a lot of runs of it. So let's start with the main thing that is going to be in demand, and that is of course consumables. Obviously here I'm talking things like honing stones. Honing stones have been going up in price ever since the dupe essentially crashed that market, and there's no reason to think that the price just isn't going to continuously go up. So my advice would be to definitely get them now. It's essentially the same for your weapon coatings. And because there's going to be 2 corrupted dungeons, then these weapon coatings in general might have a higher increased demand just overall. Beyond those 2, you obviously want to consider your stat food. Maybe it's just going to be the con food for you, or whatever stat you're running, like a dex food or whatever, something like that. Generally, I would recommend just getting the con food and then speccing into whatever your main stat is, but feel free to do whatever you want to do, whatever's cheapest for your build. Now, I personally think that beyond that, you won't really need any more consumables, but feel free to stock up on dust or whatever you think you need if you feel like it's going a bit rough, or you just want to have that just in case. I would say that if you've not been getting your rabbit food before the event ends, go and get your rabbit food, pop your luck whilst you're running the mutated dungeons. You're not really losing any, or it might be worth actually just buying some so that you have a consistent supply of that luck food. It's sort of cheap or free enough to just, you know, use whenever you do it at the moment. Now the next big thing obviously is trophies. Don't forget about these. A corrupted trophy right now is obviously like double the value, maybe even triple the value because of invasions. If you have 3 houses, then you should just get 3 of the corrupted trophies that you can afford. I always think that the middle one is generally your best bang for your buck, but feel free to do whatever you want. And it's worth noting in your bio, you can make sure that you have them up before entering the dungeon. The next big thing to talk about is weapons. I presume most of you are aware that some types of weapons are good against certain types of enemy. Well, for corrupted, it's simple. Corrupted is basically weak to thrust, nature, and arcane, but it's strong against strike and ice. So that means you shouldn't use strike and ice. So you shouldn't use like an ice gauntlet and the warhammer, for example, unless you have like a specific reason. And then as for what weapons to actually use, well, nature is generally the focus staff, and most people are rocking that as like a DPS build. But I would say that if you are the healer, do make sure you throw out your like, I was going to call them auto attacks, your standard like light and heavy attacks, because you'll actually do decent damage. For thrust, if you're a dex user, then of course you've got the bow or the musket. Either's fine, probably bow, but take your pick. Both solid choices. However, if you're a strength-based DPS, normally you've been rocking like a great axe or a warhammer, it might be worth picking the blunderbuss because obviously that is thrust as well, and it's ranged, so you will probably increase your survivability and maybe even do more damage. So I would recommend if you're a strength user, pick up a blunderbuss and just use it in the tricky moments, like if you're struggling. Now, I don't think anybody by default actually does arcane damage, but this is where we talk about gems. It might be worth putting a sapphire gem into your weapons, as that turns some of your damage into arcane. Or maybe you want to go with the amber, which is the nature gem, because it might be a little bit cheaper. Both are probably like solid options. And of course you sort these into your weapons. Now for your armor, you can consider putting in like special gems depending on the mutations. It's up to you if you find that's worth it or not. I personally generally don't just keep swapping my gems. I find it a little bit of a pain in the backside, so I don't bother. But if you're struggling, do keep in mind that, you know, maybe there's a fire mutation and you want to get the fire gem in or something like that. Moving on, if you have a lot of umbral shards to just sort of expend, maybe you're like way ahead of your friends, or maybe you're already gear score 625 or something like that, then you might want to look into the corrupted Bane weapons or the corruption ward armor. The corrupted Bane weapons, obviously they just do more damage towards corruption, so having that as a perk is actually generally good. and the corruption ward basically as an armor trait means that you take less damage from corruption, therefore you'll take less damage. They're both pretty good, but obviously the caveat to that is then you are having like a specific item that is tailored to a specific dungeon, or dungeons in this case because you have Dynasty. So I appreciate that you might not want to have multiple sets because maybe your gear score 612 and you're trying to get your gear score up and up and up, and you don't want to just tailor to the corrupted dungeons. Then in general, having multiple sets is actually more of a pain in the backside rather than a benefit. But obviously having a tank with like corrupted wards on or something like that means that they're definitely not going to take as much damage, and it'll make your life easier, especially for the healer, I guess. So I don't personally put this as like a requirement, but again, if you're struggling, then these are things that you might want to look into. So yeah, Mutated Tempest Heart is on the way, and I think it's worth stocking up on everything that you think you will need to complete it, because we might be in for a rough ride. We'll have to wait and see. If you like this video, do like, subscribe to the channel, come and follow me on Twitch. I still have COVID, I still sound a little bit weird, but when I don't have COVID, I will be streaming. Other than that, have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.